At this very moment that I'm talking to you, I am quite sure that some of you, if not all of you, are thinking about something, a project, an idea, something very specific that like to work on. But for some reason, it seems impossible for you to do it, to take the very first step. What is the reason, or what are those reasons? Why aren't you a YouTuber like you wanted to be? Why didn't you start that personal trainer career you wanted to start? The book you wanted to write? The rap career you wanted to start? Lawyer? Soccer player? Chess player? Guitar player? Violin player? Actor? Director? Business owner? Fuck it, everything. Why haven't you started yet? Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Here we're talking big games for you, gentlemen, to upgrade and become better. The question that I was asking earlier, I bet your mind is already trying to find an escape route to avoid the harsh reality of the fact. But before we get to that point, let's make a little bit of sense of those reasons your mind is building right now. The main reason in most cases is that you do not have the time or the means or the necessary information or even the connections. You might not also have the proper motivation or the operating routine or even the vision for the future of that endeavor. It can also be any reason, from your father just died to your best friend just swallowed a hammer to your wife just cheated on you with a Chris Brown picture. I don't know, it could be anything. And the fact is, you would be completely right to use those reasons as legitimate reasons to refrain from taking action because it only makes sense, right? The fact is that the mind is designed to find logical reasons to block out anything that represents a threat to its well-being from the perspective of sanity. There is nothing wrong with that. Your mind is just trying to protect you by using information that already exists in your world and magnifying the wingspan of that information to build an obstacle big enough to keep the risk of insanity at bay. Because, mind you, whatever you want to undertake is still new to you. And whatever is new is a menace until it's no longer new. The fact is that your mind is in its representation of thinking entity inside of you, just making the decision in your stead and on your behalf to protect you from what it thinks might be detrimental to you. But from that perspective, it's only operating under the assumption that what it does not know is a menace. That just means basically that your mind is controlling you as opposed to you being in control of your mind, doesn't it? But that is only the tip of the iceberg. It does not it does not even mean a thing. The real question is, why does your mind feel obligated to take control of you? That's the real question. But before we can even answer the question, we first need to understand what the mind is. So let's take the risk of asking the question, what is the mind? Put simply, one could say that the mind is the abstract element that processes every perception that we could experience, be it interior or exterior. Exterior meaning the five senses: touch, smell, sight, hearing, taste, and interior meaning conscious and unconscious. Or, better yet, consciousness and unconsciousness. That's better, right? Now, from this perspective, it could be quite impossible to admit that the mind might be different from us, because this very definition of the mind describes what we are, because that is pretty much how we operate. Who feels when we touch, taste, smell, or hear? It is us, right? Who sees when we look? Also us, right? So the experience that we might be having at those moments are being had by us, and us cannot conceive conceptually an entity that's different from it because we embody those experiences. When we smell a perfume, we do not scream, "Oh, my mind is smelling." No, we say, "I am smelling." When we see a car, we say, "I see," as opposed to "my mind sees." So, we take possession of the experience that we are having, although the experience can only be realized in conjunction of the input of various elements. When we see something, a car for instance, just like I was saying, we say, "I see a car." But who is the I? Well, the I is the authority that all the different elements necessary to a given experience respond to, isn't it? That means that the I is unchanged, but its components are modified based on the experience. The thing is, there is no other way to clearly express what we are feeling at a given moment if the subject I did not exist, because it would be a catastrophe. Think about it. It'll be some like, "Look here, bro. So that object right there, it sent a signal to my eyes that then processed it and sent it to my brains that then processed it and made connections with the pre-known idea upon anterior experiences, and then based on all this jibber jabber, well, a mind decided that it is a car." Now, can you see how crazy that is? Notice that I didn't say my mind, but rather a mind, because in this situation, a mind cannot be referred to from the possessive standpoint if the I does not exist. Now the whole thing is a total confusion. And even in my previous statement, I said my eyes, right? And then my brain, which does not make sense. Because even in this case, the I does not exist. So it would be impossible for an entity that does not exist to have a possession. It's getting confusing, isn't it? But all this goo goo gaga we just said, we can just say, "Look, bro, I see a car." And that's it. That's over. Now, keep that in your mind as we go forward. You will understand. As we Consider a different experience, for example, something that surprises us. How do we usually express ourselves in those cases? Well, we say, I was blown away. That blew my mind. I was surprised and astonished. Have you noticed anything? It's simple. Everything that is not in control of the eye, we tend to put the mind at the receiving end of the experience. Everything that we feel passive about, we attribute it to the mind. Even when we say, I was blown away, to us, the I is not to be considered as the proper subject, but rather as a representation of the mind, for lack of better words. Do you see what's going on here? We basically create two different identities, where the mind is in charge of what we think does not concern the I, and the I is in charge of what we think is in our right to be happy, proud, upsetful, etc. There, the mind starts to lose purpose and use. It starts to do not what it was intended to do, but what you and your cowardice have decided it should do. Etymologically, the word mind comes from the Old English, specifically from the word gemein. That means memory or remembrance. Now, let me spell the word so you can do your own research if you wish to. Gemein is spelled G-E-M-Y-N-D. So, what is memory? And what kind of memory are we talking about? Memory of what? Remembrance of what? Precisely. When we say memory or remembrance, it does not mean memory in the usual way. It is not about remembering something that we forgot. It's rather remembering ourselves as the I that makes us whole. In other words, the mind is the memory of the I in a nutshell. The mind is a partitioning of the absolute truth that has been awarded to each of us upon birth by the highest deity. The truth of life is heavy, deadly, gruesome, so much so that it cannot be handled by a single person. For that reason, the universe in its fairness has decided to divide the truth into as many beings as possible, each representing a slice, equating to one part of the taxation process. The memory that we talk about here is our memory, the memory of our very nature, that is divine. Regardless of what you believe in, we are, right? That means we are beings. We do exist. And these beings have been shaped, made by a power that is still beyond our comprehension. Now, y'all gotta agree with me. Whatever we were made of has left a part of it inside of us, which is what? The mind. And the mind is the memory that keeps the I at bay of losing itself. Because an entity that loses its memory loses itself. Easy. But we can go one step further. The persona that we fully develop to be the full and evolved human being, the very best version of any of us, is or should be a product of siring the mind by the eye. I know this is crazy, but just stay cool. I will explain what it means. In 1908, a book was published, written by three people who chose to go unnoticed. They called themselves the Three Initiates. The book they wrote was named The Kybalion, which is an extensive body of work of the seven principles making up the Hermetic philosophy. I'll do another episode on this specific topic, but here, what we are very interested in is one of those principles of the Hermetic philosophy, which is actually the very last one of them, i.e., the principle of gender, specifically the principle of mental gender. The seventh principle of the Hermetic philosophy states that gender is involved in everything. The whole creation has been made possible because of the existence of gender. So, there are two elements involved in here. You probably guessed it. We're talking about the masculine element and the feminine element. And those two elements are the two elements that come together to create what needs to be created. Remember when I told you in one of the early episodes that there is no creation possible without male and female entities coming together? Do you? Oh no, you don't. Fuck, I did that episode in French. Well, it's alright. Anyway, here's the gist of the principle. Basically, everything that exists under the sun is made and composed by male and female entities, and the principle is also applicable to our mental being. Earlier, I said that the eye tends to put the mind on the receiving end of certain experiences, right? Now, just think about it for a minute. From that perspective of gender exchange, which one of those two entities involved is usually put on the receiving end? Yeah, you know what it is. It is the feminine entity. That is the entity that receives the information that comes from a masculine entity, and logically, the I would be the masculine entity that would be involved. Because, well, if there are two entities and the mind happens to be the feminine entity, then the I is logically the masculine entity, isn't it? Now, you yourself, as a human being, are always being exposed to a masculine entity. If it is not yours, then it is someone else's. The I is the male, the will, the fortitude. The mind is the female, the birth, the mother. The mind takes the seed that is planted by the I, but the I must be assertive enough to dominate the mind. That is how the power of suggestion and things like hypnosis are used in psychology. But that's a different subject. Let's move on. When through your daily habits you dissociate the I and the mind, you create a rootless tree. You create a sheep with no compass. And those things roam in life with no purpose. And something or someone that has no memory cannot have a purpose. And from there, I guess you already know what is awaiting a man with no purpose. If you don't know, well, let me tell you. A man with no purpose is bound to die, forgotten by his peers, his relatives, and the world altogether. Are you comfortable with the price to pay when you relinquish your power by dividing the I and the mind? If you are, then you should stop this podcast and move to your favorite songs and forget about everything you just heard. But we both know that your life will never be the same again because now you know what your ailment is. You know where your suffering comes from. The reason why your actions do not match your decision. It all comes down to one thing. You let your mind slip out of control. And not only did you let it slip out of your control, you also gave it the possibility to break bad. So, of course, it is going to take the easy way out. Your I and your mind are not in sync. Your I needs to dominate your mind. It's like in a relationship. When you let a lady take the lead, in 99% of cases, everything is messed up. That is the truth. And I'm sorry if anybody out there listens to this and, comes up with a conclusion that I am a misogynist. Well, you can think that if it floats your boat, it's cool. But the truth is still the truth. But let's not go there. I don't have enough time for this. So the mind would say, let's not try anything. Let's stay there, consumed by fear of failing, or judgment, or even fear of success. Let's wallow in passivity, or self-sabotage, or self-deprecation. Let's believe that white people are evil. Let's believe that black people are drug addicts, gangsters, and untrustworthy. Let's believe that the system is designed specifically to make sure we fail. That is the easiest way to go about the thing, because at that point, the mind is just serving you exactly what you served it, right? Remember, I was saying earlier that we usually put the mind at the receiving end of the experience. Well, what happens is that the mind decides to mirror our behavior, putting the I at the receiving end of the experience. When you allow your mind to think, you cannot get in shape because you are 40 and obese and your metabolism is slow. So it will not amount to anything to even try to hit the gym twice a week. Well, who suffers? Who suffers the most? It is the I, isn't it? Now the I is experiencing full force. The decision it has allowed the mind to make for him. That, my friends, is the geographical liaison between the I and the mind that should not be crossed. See, the mind is a colony. And as most of us learn from history, a colony cannot be taken over or ruled unless there is a Judas to the colony, or a deep-seated policy of codependence between the ruler and the ruled one. Allow me to clarify this real quick before we take it from here. Look, we have said that the mind is the wife and the I is the husband in the process of mental creation. Well, it's not really that vulgar and humanly, but let's just put it like that for the sake of the argument. Okay? Now, we also describe the mind as the memory of the I. The memory the I is nothing without. Because the mind establishes the identity of the I, and the I gives reverence in reference to the mind. So, whatever comes after I am depends on the relationship between the I and the mind. When you have your mind shattered by inattention, the view of the I will hold no clarity. In order to conduct your colonization and your rule over your new colony as efficiently as you can, you must find out how to conduct your daily operations, right? You will have to find out who to corrupt, who to kill, who to use as a bait, how to keep the population in oblivion, or even further, how to install terror. And then you maintain your power by doing small favors when needed and by being ruthless when needed. However, you have to install an atmosphere of codependence between you and your colony. Here being the I and the mind. So basically, you have to install an atmosphere of codependence between the I and the mind. Now, look, I am not giving politics tips, although I've read The Prince and I'm well versed in the art of heavy mass manipulation. I'm just trying to make the point. Now, how does all of this apply to the I and the mind? Let's break it down. The first step is to creep in slowly with the Judas of the colonist, which is the I, obviously. To be clear, we are doing this from the perspective of someone who has little to no control over his mind and who is trying to change that. So, you want to reclaim ownership of your mind by colonizing, changing the structure, destroying the former government, changing the tax policies, the education policies, even the immigration policies. Oh, hold on. Immigration? Where the fuck did that come from? That's crazy. Look, let's keep moving. So, in order to implement all those things, what do you do first? Well, you have two choices. Either you start by sliding in information that is barely noticeable, but that can build up once inside, or you create a sense of urgency. The reason to the first is that the mind enjoys anything that provides pleasure, or at least a sense of non-aggression. And as a consequence to that comes the reason to the second, which is that the mind will not stand aside as a threat of destruction is on the way, because the destruction of the I equals to the destruction of the mind. So, unless you have really lost your mind, as the say goes, it will not let you get destroyed. So, it will comply without arguing. It is as easy as that. When you say, look here, kid, I'm trying to help you out. So, if you do the dishes, I will give you a candy, right? But if you don't, Mama will beat you up violently. At that point, what you are doing is quite clear. First of all, you exposed both the treat and the punishment. Then you exposed the urgency of the situation. And then you made it clear that the punishment does not depend on you, but the treat does. It is simple. In other words, I cannot stop bad things from happening to you or us. unless you do as I say, in which case you are even entitled to a prize. Man, I do not know a single person on earth who can say no to that. And now the game begins. Now, let's go one step further. Let's say you are working in a company. The company has a couple departments where you and your coworkers in different departments don't see each other that much, right? Over time, the accounting department has decided to staff down. So, some people gotta go. People were dropped after the staff down. Now, there are less people. The compartments that were needed before are now way too much, way too vast. So it's been decided that there'd be a fusion between departments. From that moment, people you would see maybe twice in 6 months are now on your site every day at lunch. That not so cute female you used to look down on is now in your face every day. She is smiling at you, making comments on your dress, and so on. You start sitting in the same booth. You got close. You have smelled her perfume. It is Chanel number 5. Over time, you've noticed somehow that she wears a strapless bra. Oh, mama. Now you're thinking to yourself, oh, that's cool. That'd be less trouble. And she's got a very compelling backstory. Now, I will not explain what a backstory is. If you don't know, you don't know. If you know, you know. Do your own research. Anyway, your point of view about the not so cute female has started to change. But exactly what has happened, would you ask me? Well, it's simple. Pleasant information has crept into you, and more importantly, pleasant information that are barely noticeable. Because the thing is, the mind does not notice pleasant information, the senses do. And then the mind processes them passively. Because guess what? You, gentlemen, have put the mind at the receiving end of the experience. So, it is not involved in it. It just passively is taking whatever you bring in, if it is positive or neutral. That is how your mind has been taken over. And once your mind is taken over, your heart and your soul are more than likely to go with the flow. Yeah, they will cave. In this example, you have done that thing unconsciously, right? You have just been exposed to information that have altered your state of mind at a given time. Now, suppose that you can do the same thing on purpose. How great would that be? Huh? Now, the information is no longer being sent in by fortuity. Now, the mind is a calculated target, targeted by the I who wants to move shit around. Now, the I can change the mind as long as it knows how to plant in the right information, the barely noticeable one, the pleasant one, to take over and take charge. That's an example of how the mind can be consciously manipulated in order to fit the proper standards that we hold for ourselves. However, things are not necessarily that straightforward. Other than the little hiccups the mind faces by being downplayed by the eye, it also encounters several problems due to its very use. When those problems arise, the mind loses its focus and the ability to operate at its best capacity. In a Buddhist philosophy, those problems are called the five hindrances. Now, what are the five hindrances? The five hindrances, simply put, are a set of challenges the mind is faced with in its way to operate in the fashion it is designed to. We're talking about sensual desires. We're talking about ill will. We're talking about dullness. We're talking about restlessness. We're talking about skeptical doubt. Those are the five hindrances. Sensual desires represent every external stimuli that take you hostage through the attraction they exercise over your mind. It's quite common nowadays, unless you are living in a cave, to see most females strapped in spandex, half naked, breast hanging out, butt cheeks saying hello to the general public, pretending fashion and sexiness. When most men meet those, well, we tend to look back, right? Just to contemplate the buttocks. In doing so, we generate reasons for our mind to lose focus. Because remember, we said earlier that the mind loves what allows it to have an easy existence. Ill will is pretty much a decision that one makes not to like things that do not fall under our tolerance threshold. Maybe it is a person, or a thing, or an event. Maybe you do not like to wake up before 9 a.m., but now you have a job that is scheduled to start at 6 a.m. and is 35 minutes away from your place. So you must wake up at least 4:30 if you want to make it on time. Think about it. Ill will. Literally, your will is ill. Your will to undertake and do anything beneficial to yourself is troubled because you resent actions that bring opposition to your comfort, which is the exact opposite of healthy will. When your will is healthy, it cares not about how difficult or challenging anything is. It just does what needs to be done. Dullness is a lack of motivation. If I was dull, I would not be doing this right now. Dullness is the want to not do a goddamn thing. Maybe you want to stay sitting on your couch watching TV shows the whole day, eat burgers because you don't even feel like cooking. You are not sharp. That's the opposite of dull, right? If you are dull, that means you are not sharp. You are corpsey, like a dead body. Basically, you're just a dead person with a breath. That's all you are. Restlessness is the fourth hindrance. Notice that this one is quite special because you suffer from it without even knowing that you're suffering from something. You don't know what is ailing you. It just means that your mind can't focus, it can't concentrate. It always is jumping from tool to tool, from idea to idea. And that usually causes you to never really observe and study an idea all the way to its bottom before disregarding it. How can you do anything properly if you do not even allow yourself to analyze the thing? Skeptical doubt is the worst of them because not only can it be developed inside of you, but it can also be planted from outside. Ultimately, it is the lack of acknowledgement of your own capacities, your lack of authority in anything you set your mind on. You want to be a dancer, a singer, but you doubt your abilities. And the doubt is not even based on a logical fact. That's the worst part of it. You just think you are no good. Who said that? Who told you? Have you tried? Have you even taken a dance class and stuck to it for a couple years? No. You just decided that you are not good enough. You just doubted yourself from the go. One can be plagued by any of those. The point is that the mind, due to its fierce possibility to make the eye capable of anything, is also fragile enough to be endangered by elements that would appeal to the eye. Humans are vastly capable. We humans are capable of prodigious feats. We just either do not believe we can achieve stuff, or even if we do, we don't necessarily take the right approach, and as a consequence, we are left behind by our very lack of methodology or self actualization. Life is supposed to be a voyage. However, we decide where we want to end up at the finish line that we usually, based on our life decisions, make for ourselves. We can either decide to go upward in the pursuit of our best self, or downward in the pursuit of the most degraded version of us. The choice is ours, and regardless of whether we are willing to make the right decisions or not, well, they will be made for us. But if we decide to take them on, head on first, at least failure will never equate to not trying. To take charge of your mind, you first need to acknowledge that you are and can be plagued by the five hindrances. Observe them clearly as they manifest in your sight, and then dissociate yourself from whichever one of the hindrances you are facing. And all this we can do through meditation. But that is a topic for another day. For the time being, remember that you are only as weak as your decision to be better. No one will change your life. Only you can. Establish the order between the eye and the mind, and you will see unity everywhere. And then you will know everything is alright. My name is Ice, and this is the Ais-pod. I'll see y'all next week.